AMD this last week launched their new Raven Ridge APUs, finally bringing Zen CPUs and Vega graphics together on the same AM4 socket. One of the first systems you'll be able to buy with the new architecture is the Axiom TS Mini PC from Computer Upgrade King. So why are we doing a review of a pre-built system? Well, let's just say this one might be bringing something a little special to the table. What's up everyone, I'm Jeff with Modders Inc., and if you're watching this video, then you likely know by now that earlier this week, AMD launched their new Ryzen APUs known as Raven Ridge into the world. These two new chips feature a new and improved Zen Plus architecture and onboard Vega graphics. Starting with the Ryzen 3 2200G, it's a 4-core, 4-threaded CPU clocked at 3.5 GHz base with a 3.7 GHz frequency via Precision Boost 2. Also on board is a Vega 8 GPU with 32 TMUs and a clock speed of up to 1100 MHz. The 2200G will retail for just $99 and replace the Ryzen 3 1200 CPU. Also new to the Zen family is the Ryzen 5 2400G, which sports 4 cores and 8 threads thanks to SMT support, as well as a base clock of 3.5 GHz boosting itself to 3.9. Powering the graphics on the 2400G is the Vega 11 GPU, sporting 44 TMUs and a clock speed of up to 1250 MHz. Retail on the 2400G is set to $169 and will take the place of the Ryzen 5 1400 in AMD's lineup. Both of these APUs will be compatible with all existing A320 and B350 motherboards via a BIOS update. Please check with your motherboard manufacturer for details on when that update will be available. We'll get on to the APU's performance in just a little bit, but first, let's get to the star of today's show. If you guessed there'd be a mini ITX motherboard inside the Computer Upgrade King Axiom TS Mini, you'd be wrong. Instead, this diminutive 4.8-liter case is packing a Micro-ATX form factor board. The base configuration of the Axiom will include an AMD A320-based board with a SanDisk X400 120GB SSD, the stock AMD Wraith cooler, a 200-watt small form factor power supply, and a dual-channel kit of DDR4 clocked at 2400 MHz. There are also planned optional upgrades to a B350 chipset, M.2 NVMe SSD, and 3000 MHz dual-channel memory kits as well. All of that plus a Windows 10 home license for a starting price of just $435 with the 2200G or $499 with the 2400G. The Axiom case itself is very well put together. The front of the case features one each USB 2.0 and 3.0 ports, headphone and microphone jacks, a power button, and a great-looking blue LED light bar that shines through the silver facade. The side panel features plenty of ventilation for our APU, and the power supply has a blower-style fan to exhaust the hot air right out the back. Cooling in the Axiom was surprisingly good, especially considering there's only a CPU and a power supply fan working here. Temps stayed right around 28 degrees Celsius on idle, and only peaked at around 55 Celsius on that 2400G APU. While the inside of the case feels pretty roomy for what's in there, there's really no room for expansion. If you were to outgrow the graphics capabilities of this box, you can't add a low-profile video card, nor can you add another 2.5-inch SSD. About the only thing you can do here would be to add an M.2 drive or upgrade the memory. So at this point in the video, I'm sure you're all dying to know, how did this actually perform? Well, I spent most of the week running the Raven Ridge 2200G and 2400G against its closest Intel counterparts, that being the i3-8100 quad-core at 3.6 GHz and the i5-8400 6-core running at a significantly lower 2.8 GHz. All CPUs and GPUs were tested at stock speeds, and AMD claims that their new Raven Ridge APUs with Vega graphics on board can actually stand up to these two Intel chips when they're paired with an NVIDIA GT 1030, and that's exactly how I stacked them up here. Cinebench shows both AMD CPUs losing to their Intel counterparts, but the gap isn't quite as wide as it's been in the past for AMD, especially in single-threaded performance here. In fact, the 2400G edged out the i3-8100 in single-threaded testing, something we've not seen a lot of from AMD since Ryzen's initial launch back in March of last year. Moving into our gaming synthetics, Unigine superposition was not kind to any of our systems, but Intel and NVIDIA notched the slight win. In fact, the GPU seems to be the limiting factor on the Intel boxes, as both the i3 and the i5 tallied an identical score to one another. 3D Mark Firestrike shows the 2200G lagging behind the other three chips, but the 2400G goes toe-to-toe with the i5-8400, coming just 75 points shy in the overall score. TimeSpy turns the tables and notches Team Red's first win in this test, with the 2400G beating out the 8400 in graphics and overall score. This test also shows the real benefit faster memory can bring that Vega GPU, as it seems to scale up nicely alongside the increased memory bandwidth. Doom, with its Vulkan backbone, again gives the nod to AMD here, and shows very similar results to TimeSpy. The 2400G takes the crown over the i5 paired with the GT 1030, although the lows were slightly better on the Intel side of things. Fallout 4 proved itself to be very playable on all of these systems, but the Ryzen APUs seem to have a tough time keeping their frame rate out of the teens. I'm not sure if this can be attributed to CPU or GPU performance on Ryzen, or if a patch may fix this later, but the 2200G had a low nearly half of what was observed on the i3-8100. Moving over to Grand Theft Auto 5, this title seems to really favor both Intel and Nvidia's architecture at the moment. Either that or Vega and the new Zen is just not properly optimized yet. The game is plenty playable on both platforms, don't get me wrong, but both the i3 and the i5 manage averages in the 90s, with the 50s and 60s for AMD, making me feel like there might be something left on the table here. Finally, we've got a couple esports titles here, both of which performed remarkably well. Overwatch had averages close to 70 for the AMD chips, and in the low 90s on Intel, though like GTA, the lows were a bit lower than I'd like to see for a competitive game like this. CSGO shows a sizable lead for Intel, with AMD putting up respectable numbers for the most part. My concern here is again that 0.1% low, with AMD dropping all the way down to 11 FPS, with Intel managing to keep those down at 28 and 53 respectively. And closing us out is Rocket League, which gave AMD back the slight lead, again with 3000 MHz memory responsible for that uptick. This game really impressed me on AMD, and I believe the reason for the lows in the 20s may be related to the instant replay system, not AMD's performance itself. I did notice some stuttering during the transitions here. As with all new platform releases, take these early numbers with a little bit of a grain of salt. When Ryzen 7 launched last March, it was met with a slew of bugs and performance issues, which took a couple of months to iron out. But with AMD managing some early victories here, the future is definitely bright for these entry-level chips. I can certainly see a need for them in these sub-$500 builds, both for gaming and general use computing. So to wrap up, what do I think about AMD's new Raven Ridge APUs inside the Axiom TS Mini? Well, simply put, this very small box is an excellent value, even as a pre-built system. Remember, for $435, you're getting a quad-core 2200G with Vega graphics, 8 gigs of DDR4 running at 2400, a 120 gig SSD, and a Windows 10 license. And $499 bumps you up to a 2400G, which adds SMT and ups your Vega power as well. The design on the case is minimalistic, the looks are pretty simple, but I can guarantee the Axiom TS would look right at home on nearly any desk, or sitting next to any gaming console in your living room. If you're shopping for a low-budget, general-purpose computer with some entry-level gaming chops, you certainly can't go wrong here. That's going to do it for me, guys. Make sure to hit the like button on your way down to the video description, where you'll find a link to the Computer Upgrade King website, along with the Axiom TS Mini PC. Also be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future news, reviews, or builds. Thank you all for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next video.